big news, big numbers, good numbers. We don't like to celebrate pointless anniversaries.
We're not doing 12-year anniversaries.
No, we don't do them. We don't do 13.
We're not doing 42.
42. No, we do zeros and fives.
Yes.
And the Sega Saturn hit the 25 yesterday.
Wow. That means you can rent a car at 25. You can run for Congress.
Congress at 25. Yeah. 10 years away from that presidential bid.
Yep.
Yes, the Sega Saturn came out March 11th in 1995. Yes, 95. Yes.
And then around this time in May in the U.S. May 11th in North America.
Yeah, May 11th in North America.
Yes.
So the Saturn was Sega's CD-based follow-up to the Genesis. And it had an interesting launch in the U.S. It was originally slated to launch on, I believe it was September 2nd, 1995. But at the very first E3, Tom Kalinske announced that it was available right now.
He didn't want to.
Nope. For $3.99 with a copy of Virtua Fighter. And he, went on to describe the features. Said there was a high consumer demand, and that Sega had already shipped 30,000 Saturn units to Toys R Us, Babbage's Electronics Boutique, and Software, etc. This is from the Wikipedia article for immediate release. It upset retailers, and it ended up being a bad move for Sega overall. I didn't know this. KB Toys responded by dropping Sega from the lineup entirely. I had no idea that actually happened.
Is that why Sega stuff hit the bargain bin?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because you need a good relationship with your retailers, and you can't throw them under the bus, and you can't deny them products for them to sell. Competitors gets that's just horrible business.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't just surprise release something and not make sure that all of your retailers.
KB was a huge retailer.
Yeah, your retail partners
just as big as Toys R Us.
Sony subsequently unveiled the retail price for the PlayStation. Olaf Olafsson said the retail price is $299 and then walked away to applause after the $399 announcement from
the
Sega.
Same Olaf of the Super Nintendo prototype. That's the same Olaf, isn't it?
Olaf Olafsson, yes, yeah. I believe so. So yeah, so
Sega wanted to rush this out to beat PlayStation to the punch.
Right.
It sounds like, but they did not. They weren't prepared at all to do it.
Right. They weren't
in terms of production quantity, in terms of letting retailers know what the hell was going on,
Yep.
in terms of laying out a good marketing strategy, and most importantly, not having enough titles to significantly launch with or having a set plan.
So the U.S. launch titles were not actually all that bad. It was actually a fairly decent lineup of launch titles, but it was very few. Not as few as the Nintendo 64 later, but the U.S. launch titles were Clockwork Knight, which take or leave, Daytona USA, Panzer Dragoon, Pebble Beach Golf Links, Virtua Fighter, which was a great port for the time.
Okay, so 2 arcade games,
and then Worldwide Soccer, Sega International.
That's a weak. That to me is weak.
Sony's launch was. You have to understand though, Sony's launch lineup was no better when it launched. The Nintendo 64 had a bad launch lineup. Your launch lineup is not going to necessarily determine your success.
Sure, but this is all I'm going to say. This is on the tail of 2 other previous, within the past 2 years, disastrous launches almost. Sure. 2.5 years. 32X did horribly, so you needed to shore up your fan base to say this is why we made a mistake with the 32X. This is why you should own a Saturn, and I don't see that with those games.
I'll make a slight concession. The U.S. launch for the PlayStation was a little bit better than I thought, but honestly not a ton better. Air Combat, which was good, but basic arcade game. Battle Arena Shinden, which does not hold a candle to...
that was heavily marketed, though, as a launch title, I remember that.
Yeah, but does not hold a candle to Virtua Fighter. ESPN Extreme Games, which is awful, but I actually loved it.
Jam Tournament? Was that one?
NBA Jam Tournament
There
edition.
You go.
A tennis game. Rayman, Ridge Racer.
Raiden Project?
Both good. I don't see Raiden Project as a launch title.
I saw it when I looked on the PlayStation Giant Bomb site. Maybe was that not
I'm looking at a different Wikipedia
Street
site.
Fighter the movie.
Street Fighter the movie, the game, Total Eclipse Turbo, and Zero Divide.
That's a better launch lineup to me.
What kind of game is Total Eclipse Zero Turbo?
Which one?
What kind of game is Total Eclipse Turbo?
I have no idea.
Okay, what kind of type? I mean, it's a comparable
third-person shooter.
In terms of what I want to play, I would probably pick about 3 games from each.
Well, I'm just telling you because if Raiden Project was there, you have a shooter, you have a action platformer with Rayman, you have NBA Jam tournament, you have a fighter. Ridge Racer obviously did huge for them. Street Fighter, you can make fun of that, but that sold some. Street Fighter the movie there. So here's the point. They didn't have a Sonic game to launch.
No.
That's insane not to have that or wait for that ready to go.
Well, they never had a Sonic game on the Saturn, period. There was Sonic Jam, but there was no new 3D Sonic game at all on the Saturn.
That's a mistake.
Yes, people have said that's a mistake forever and ever. You can't release
Why am I buying your console?
Yeah, you can't take your new system and not have your most popular character.
Would you imagine if Nintendo said, we're going to skip Mario on our system? Be like, what? Excuse me? Like why would you do that? The most bankable hit that you have on your console. Why would you even think about that?
But I do think
disastrous.
There was a lot of things that led into the Sega Saturn being a failure.
And Tom Kalinske, they
in the U.S.
He tried to because he was obviously responsible for a lot of the success of the Genesis, and for this they didn't listen to him.
Right.
They were just like, no, we're going to do it. Then he quit. He quit shortly after that? He was out because he didn't want to be around for that anymore.
But the Saturn was quite popular in Japan, and it did have a fan base here. I did not have much experience with the Saturn early on. It wasn't until later. I do actually very much enjoy the Sega Saturn today as a system. I think it's a very good system. A lot of good import games and even some good stuff in the U.S. It's Vonnie's favorite system. It's my wife's favorite system.
Try to get the breakdown of sales in North America versus Japan. Where is it? It's not on the Wikipedia. It just says 9.26 million total.
I always love the story about how Vonnie got her Saturn, which was taking her limo deposit for prom and buying the Saturn instead, and telling her date that her date's parents would have to drive them to prom instead. So her Saturn is named Prom Date, and that's the one that we've kept alive through repairs for many, many years.
Fair enough. Oh, here we go. It was 5.75 million in Japan, which surpassed the Genesis sales there of 3.58 million. So it did about 50% better in Japan. And then 1.8 million in the US, and then 1 million in Europe. And wow, that's awful.
Yeah.
And 530,000 elsewhere. It did only 1.8 million in the US.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not a success.
Holy shit.
I like the system, but it was not a success. That said, I could go on about the good games for a long time, and I won't, but suffice to say, it has a really good shooter library. At the time, it had a great fighting game library, and the fighting games generally perform much better than their PlayStation counterparts. Sega's focus on getting arcade conversions right was something that has always, I think, set them apart, and especially during the Saturn and then into the Dreamcast era. Yeah. They carried that on to the Dreamcast.
That's how they start their systems, even with the Genesis. We're going to get the cool arcade ports.
Yeah,
but then you have to obviously build off of that.
And they've always been good at it. I mean, all the stuff they had on the Genesis was great for its time, and then the Saturn and the Dreamcast as well.
So to give you an idea of how far it dropped, the Genesis did 30, let's see, we'll just say around 32 million units, the Sega Genesis. 30.75, and then it's in the Majesco re-release, or the later ones was 1.5. We'll just say about 33. 33
the Genesis, million. The Majesco would have been like the Gen 3.
The Gen 3, that piece of garbage. The 1.5 million, that many? Wow. We'll just say it did about 32 to 33 million.
I feel like those probably did fine because they were like in Toys R Us's and stuff, like in stacks. I remember seeing them for like $20.
Oh, okay. At the very end, like 97?
Yeah, $20-$30. I think that was like, you could get those, you could get the Gen Model 3s really cheap. Because I remember being young and like having my first job and being in a Toys R Us and being like, holy shit, I could buy another Genesis right now if I wanted to with what's in my fucking pocket.
So then 3 years later, in 92, they come out with the Sega CD, which had a lifetime sales of 2.24 million. I'm surprised it was that many. 2.24 million. The best-selling game was Sonic CD with 1.5 million. Again, so it was attached.
It's actually less than I thought it would have. That was Universal sales?
I'm looking at Wikipedia. 2.24 million.
I'm not questioning you. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I'm just saying. That's what I said.
Universal, not US.
But then that's technically an add-on though. It's on its own system.
Yeah, that's true.
But then you get to the 32X, which came out too soon, 2 years after the Sega CD in '94. It did only 800,000. That should have been a huge, obviously, red flag. That we are coming out with this stuff too quickly, too many add-ons, and we have to take a break. But they didn't. They went. We're going to do a new system right after this.
The Sega CD not being a huge success, that's, I don't necessarily blame Sega. Well, yes, they could have done a lot more to market it, I suppose. They could have put more games into it. They could have focused more on how it... I think that was another point in time where they were focusing too much on the multimedia aspect of things. They wanted to do too much of the interactive fucking video shit, and they didn't focus...
Prize Fighter!
They didn't actually focus enough
Crisscross.
They didn't actually focus enough on games that took advantage of it, like Lunar, or Popful Mail, and stuff like that. They didn't do that well. But the 32X, that was a truly bad idea from the beginning.
Yes.
Just an awful idea all around. Like I said, the CD unit, I get it, but the 32X was just that was miserable.
Do you think if they didn't do the 32X and went to the Saturn, the Saturn would have done that much better? I think we've done a little bit. I think it
would have done a little bit better. I think people. I think consumer. I remember being a kid, and I remember the Saturn coming out, and I remember laughing at it.
Because you couldn't believe it. It was just coming out.
Because I could, yes. Yeah. I remember, I would have been a teenager at the time, and I remember my friends and I being like, this is fucking crazy.
Because the 32X just came out.
Right, exactly.
Like less than a year ago, and now you got this coming out.
So with people who are a little bit older who had money at the time, and they can tell me if I'm wrong or not, I mean, it's all hypothetical anyways, but yes, I do think had the 32X not come out, the Sega CD could have been seen as, an ahead of its time failure, and there might have been more trust in Sega going into the Saturn. Let's see. But I do think the price point was a lot of it too. $399 from a company that just keeps releasing shit that gets no support.
So yeah, and plus I think Sony's I'm trying to remember, the Sony marketing campaign was great for the PlayStation at the time. And they came at I think people just wanted something different at that point. So it was also a nice way to slide in, because you had Nintendo with the N64 was seen as kiddie. Well, it wasn't even out in the US yet.
No.
But it was a perfect time for new blood to get into the market. And then they ran with it. Sony, they ate everyone's lunch.
Well, I always say that these new competitors come in after a serious stumble from a prior competitor.
And this is two stumbles basically.
So we had Sony coming in after Sega stumbled, and we got Microsoft coming in after Nintendo had a big stumble.
Sure.
That's why I don't think a lot of these, and this isn't even to bring up specific other topics, but that's why I think we don't see a lot of truly new challengers to consoles these days. Is we can argue the ups and downs of some of these systems, but they've all been relatively successful enough. There hasn't been any stumbles as big as...
you can say the Wii U was a stumble, but
the Wii U was.
But Nintendo has their first-party properties that keeps them. That's what we said. They have the first-party properties. It doesn't matter. They can keep stumbling.
True.
People are going to buy it.
And I do have to point... Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm being crazy. The Wii U was a huge stumble, but I think at this point, Nintendo's already looked at as its own thing. Yes. Not so much as...
Nintendo is immune for lots of different reasons. We talked about this before. They have more money than God, and they have the first-party properties that no one else can touch. So, I mean, that alone, they're fine. They're self-sufficient. Like, they can keep on rolling. And like I said, they make money off no one predicted how much money they make off the fucking Amiibo. And that even helped them during the Wii U, the bad Wii U times in the 3DS. So they're fine. So well, thanks for this Video Game Year Sega Saturn segment, 1995. That's basically what we did. I can't remember if, like, I think I told you before the podcast, like my cousins, the three boys, they had like every console that came out.
Right.
They may have had a Saturn. I don't remember them ever playing it. They just went straight to the PlayStation. Like most people did, obviously. They just went to hey, just pop in just let's see, what were they playing? If you got a PlayStation right away, what you say? You would have got Ridge Racer for sure.
Would have gotten Ridge Racer. I probably would have been sold on to Shinden. Everyone I knew who had it had that ESPN Extreme Games. That was awful, but I enjoyed it. I wonder if that happened to like be a cheap one like early on.
I don't know. I wasn't looking at the magazines. Was there a huge amount of hype from magazines from the Japanese release from the prior year for the PlayStation? Was it already being built?
I don't know. I have to be honest. My knowledge of video game magazines from like the pre-Saturn, pre-PlayStation era is, like post-Genesis being a big deal to... I didn't get back into game magazines again until like Final Fantasy VII came out, because that's when I bought my PlayStation.
And obviously Sony courted all the third parties that Nintendo and Sega couldn't get. So that obviously,
Right.
like I said, that wouldn't be able to happen since the third parties are on almost every console. So you wouldn't have that competitive advantage anymore. It doesn't exist. So anyway, yeah, wow. Well, there you go, Sega Saturn. Enjoy your 9 million while the PlayStation did 102.49 million. Holy shit. For the first console out of the gate. That's nuts. I mean, holy crap.